Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you and share my ideas about communication in autism. And today we will talk about talking, actually, how autistic individuals speak, which language they speak. So, just a minute. Communication in autism is often described as impaired, right? Take any diagnostic classification and you will see lack of this, lack of that, and so on. So their communication is impaired. But the question is it a correct conclusion? Do individuals with autism communicate? I can tell you right now, they do, and they are communicating all the time. Even those whom we call difficult, withdrawn, aloof, and so on. It's just us who do not understand their attempts to communicate with us. The second question we will answer today is what language do they speak? What language do they use? And I don't mean German, English, Spanish, and so on, because there are autistic languages. They're languages they think in and they speak them. And again, today we will discuss what we should do to establish meaningful communication with them. And just a few quotes because I want other voices to be heard as well. This is from Jasmine O'Neill, a lady with autism, and she insists that non-autistics can be ignorant of the autistic struggles to communicate. And she also talks about autistic languages. And communication in autism is not a failure. It is not non-existent. It is simply different. And it is both in nonverbal and verbal communication. Let us take one example. This picture, you can see, it is Lucy Blackman, a lady from Australia, nonverbal lady from Australia. She's written a beautiful book, Lucy's Story. And this is an example from her childhood. It is nonverbal communication. I was sitting on the potty on the babysitter's kitchen floor because I wanted just think for a few seconds what Lucy was trying to communicate. I will give you the answer. She wanted something to eat. Confusing, isn't it? But the matter is, when Lucy was toilet trained, her babysitter was busy in the kitchen cooking something. So Lucy sat on the potty in the kitchen and the babysitter bribed her with something tasty. That is why this little girl, this toddler, if she wanted something tasty, she took her potty, went to the kitchen and sat on it. You see, it was communication, but misinterpreted by other people. Or let us take verbal communication. It is also an example to show that even those who are more or less verbal, sometimes their communication is misinterpreted. It is from a Japanese young man's book, Naoki Higashida. An autistic girl approached her classmates and said, all of us. So their interpretation was, she wants to join in with us. But they were wrong. The matter is, earlier the same day, their teacher said, tomorrow we will go to somewhere. And the girl wanted to know when tomorrow exactly. But the only words available for her, the only words he could use were just this, all of us. Again, misinterpretation, but not lack of communication from this little girl. So what I'm trying to say is, it is two-way process. They are trying to communicate with us, but we find it confusing. And on the other hand, we are communicating with them and they find it confusing. So who is communicatively impaired? I think both parties, right? So in order to communicate successfully, we have to have shared experiences. I'll show you this. These two cartoon characters are discussing the object. In this case, it is a ball. Yes, their experiences with this object are a bit different. For one, it was playing with the ball on the beach. For the other, playing football. But still, communication is possible. But what if one of them is autistic and his sensory perception is very, very different? Of course, communication becomes very difficult, if not impossible. But so where these communication differences, these shared experiences come from? Very briefly, we have to just talk about sensory perception, right? Uh, s- Perception is a complicated process, several stages. The first one is sensation. It is when we see something, for example, this object, right? A rectangular object, but we don't know what it is yet. We feel it, but we don't know what it is. It is sensation. Then we move on, we interpret, oh, it's a book. And then it is comprehension. We know what to do with this object, we can read it. In typical development, interpretation is verbal. It means they remember labels. It is a book. In sensory development, it is sensory labels, right? How they feel, whether it is visual or tactile and so on. So autistic children, even non-verbal children, they do not stop in their development. They develop like others do, but via a different route. By the way, we all possess these two sides of perception, verbal and non-verbal, sensory, right? I'm pretty sure that each of you at least several times in your life experience this, sensory, like sixth feelings, this gut feeling sometimes. This is sensory. It is from sensory uh, images, if you like. But in typical development, verbal interpretation becomes dominant. For example, look at these six creatures. They are very different, perhaps in color, in movement, in pattern. But in typical development, all these creatures will go through one slot because they are all cats. In autism, sensory interpretation may be dominant. And that is why these six creatures are very different, because they are different. And for those who are at the stage of this early perception, verbal words have no meanings. It's like dogs barking or water running in pipes and so on. For them, they are just sounds. They do learn how to interpret them verbally, but later on in life. But they do develop their sensory-based language. Real language. They have their own sensory words. For example, this is an example from Donna Williams. She says that verbal words have no relation, any relation to actual objects or creatures or animals, people. But she had her own words, for example, for a cat. And she had two words for this, fush and brook. Fush, it was the sound of your hand when she was stroking this little kitty. And